Okay, so first, choosing the varieties for a cold climate. So every single type of seed, like cucumbers, for example, there's different varieties within the cucumber family. Some varieties do well in hot weather, some do well in cool weather. They all have different lengths of time. So if you just plant a cucumber, you don't know, is this the best cucumber for the region? So I have this printed out sheet that's the Cook County Extension recommendations for this region. And I'm going to send that to everyone who registered too, so you'll have like a digital copy. But those are just a few examples. They're not everything, but a few examples of a few varieties of each plant, cucumbers, beans, whatever, that actually does well in a short growing season like we have. So if you want to get technical, we're in zone 3B. So there's like agricultural zones. Cities is like 5. And then as you go up, it goes 4, 3, and then you go to Canada, you're in 2.
Would you know what Isabel is?
Isabel is the same as Finland. Yeah, so as you get closer to the shore, it actually changes because the lake effect changes the temperature. So it makes it warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. But here we're far enough inland, so Silver Bay might be a little bit cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter. Whereas Finland and Isabella are more inland, so it will be zone 3B. So if you want to get technical about that, sometimes you'll find information on those varieties, but you don't have to know that. In this area, there are some things that need help to actually ripen. So think hot weather crops like melons, peppers, tomatoes, especially big tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes usually do fine outside, but some things, even if you're planting them right at the beginning of the year, they might need some help. So that could look like plastic over the top, maybe a little mini hoop house. Or it could look like little caps that you can put over your tomatoes just at the beginning of the season. I don't remember what they're called, but they're basically like mini plastic domes. We have an example in the summer, but when you want to come see, but it's basically like a really easy way to make a mini cattle panel hoop house. So if you really were like, I want to grow melons, I want to grow eggplants, I want to grow okra, I want to grow like really hot weather crops, you probably will need that because they will not ripen without it. But if you have like a really nice sunny microclimate, it's like in your yard, you're like, this is the really warm spot, that's where I would put your tomatoes or your cucumbers, whatever is like a warmer weather crop, they won't need that extra season extension. Cherry tomatoes are always better. Bigger tomatoes, you might need to help them a little. Okay, and then we'll go into types of seeds. So sometimes if you're looking at, I just put some seed packets around just so you can look at them as examples, but basically if you look at the seed packet, maybe it will say heirloom on it, maybe it will say hybrid. So what does all that mean? So hybrid means that it's been crossed with other varieties that helps with disease resistance. So if you have an issue in your garden, like, oh, every year my tomatoes will have a blight on them, or they die, or the cucumber gets a mold or something, maybe you should look into getting a hybrid, which is not genetically modified. It just means that they've crossed these seeds to help with disease resistance. But you can't harvest your own seeds from those hybrids. They won't be true to type. Which means, like, if I wanted to do seed saving, I would want to get an heirloom variety, which is an old variety that people have been selecting over time for a long time. So, heirlooms for seed saving, hybrids, maybe for disease resistance, and some of them are organic, some are not. So if you want it to make sure that it's organic seed, you want to look for the organic label, or get from an organic seed company. I like to buy from seed companies that are in Minnesota because then you know that they've been tested in cold climates, like North Circle Seed Company is like a small seed company based in Minnesota. North Circle Seeds. But you can also get from your garden store, Johnny's, whatever. So then age, storage, and germination rate. So when you see a seed packet, you're going to see, if you want to look at the back, okay, you'll see packed for 2024 on the back. Sell by, whatever. Some of them might say 2018. That doesn't mean that they're not going to germinate. You can still use old seed. It depends depends on which variety it is. So like onions do not do well. Like onions and lettuce, that will maybe only last a year, but tomatoes and peppers might last 5 years. So it all depends on how you store it. If you're storing your seeds in the fridge, basically in a cool, dark place, they will last so much longer. So don't keep your seeds in your car, because if you keep your seeds in your car, they're going to get hot and they're going to die, and then they're not going to germinate. Germination just means the amount of seeds that grow out of however many plants. So it'll say the germination rate on some of these, not all of them will say it, but maybe it'll be 94% in 2024. Every year that might go down a little. So if you have really old seeds, you want to plant more seeds per square. You know, like if you have new seeds, you only need 1 seed, but if you have 2018 seeds, maybe I'll put 4 seeds in because you don't know how many are gonna germinate. And then it also will tell you the number of days until harvest. So that will tell you when to plant so that you know you can harvest before the frost date. So like I said, here in Finland, our season to be able to start is usually June and ends in September. So you don't really want to plant things too late, because if you're planting your tomatoes in July, you're not going to get it before the frost. So basically, you want to seed, this is a general rule, seed your transplants 6 to 8 weeks before you want to plant them outside. So it depends on the varieties a little, and I'll go into that, but basically now is the time. That's why we're doing this today. Sorry. So mid-April is a great time to plant if you're planning to plant in June, or to seed. So now here we are now, mid-April. So that's on deciding your seeds. Now we're going to talk about the seed starting location. So it wants warmth and it wants light. The germination area needs to be warm. So if you have a place in your house that is 65 to 85 degrees, that would be the best. I know it's hard to find that. It doesn't necessarily need light at the beginning. It's more important for the very beginning to have warmth and moisture, because that's what makes the seed germinate. So right at the beginning, that's like the first week, basically. Right when you start your seeds, you want it to be 65 to 85 degrees, and you want it to be moist. The soil needs to stay moist. So you can either add some like plastic wrap over the top, a little dome, something like that to keep the moisture in for that first week, so that your soil doesn't dry out, because you also don't want to be watering it a bunch and soaking it and maybe spraying your soil that you just put in right away. So that place does not need to be bright. It can just be anywhere as long as it's warm. If you want to buy a heat mat, you can. It's not necessary as long as you have like a warm place. Then after you see the little sprouts come up, you need lights. So that is when you are going to need, it needs to be over 60 degrees at least, at the minimum, and you're going to need as much light as you can. So maybe a south-facing window in your house, or if you have some artificial light, like even a fluorescent light bulb over your seed tray, they're not that expensive. That will help so much to keep them growing healthily, because even if I put it next to this window, it might not be getting the 12 to 16 hours of light that it needs every day. You know, it might only be getting it during that one time of day that the sun comes through.
12 to 16 hours?
Yeah. 12 to 16 hours. And so if you do want to put an artificial light on there, you want it on a timer, because you don't want it all night long. That'll freak them out. The plants will be confused. So if you can just turn it off and turn it on early in the morning, turn it off at night, or have it on a timer or something like that, that's the best. I know that you don't want to be investing too much money sometimes in this, so you don't need a timer. But
So it doesn't have to be like an official grow light, just a
No.
fluorescent.
yeah, the grow lights are really expensive, and they're not even better than just like a fluorescent light bulb. So, I mean, they might be slightly better, but you don't need that. Yeah. And then once it starts growing, you're gonna need to have some airflow too. So it's nice to have a fan in the room, something. You don't want to have that dome on there anymore. If you did did put like some plastic wrap or like a little plastic dome on there, you want to make sure to take that off once the plant starts growing its first real leaves, because if it's too humid in there, that's when disease happens. If it's too damp, it can dampen off, which is basically like soil pathogens from too much moisture kill off the stem of the plant. So if you ever have plants just, oh, they look great, and then suddenly they die, it's probably because of that. You didn't have any airflow and you had too much moisture. Okay, so any questions on like the seeds or the seed location? Yeah.
I have a question about the light. Like, do you want it to like kind of have like a timer, like to like reflect the outside in a way, or do you kind of want it always to have light on it?
Yeah, so just the 12 to 16 hours a day.
Okay.
So only, like, it doesn't have to be at a certain time. If you just wake up and you turn it on and you go to bed and you turn it off, that's fine. It doesn't have to be like exactly with the sun or anything. Yeah.
When you're saying fluorescent lights, are those the purple full spectrum ones or any light ones?
Any normal fluorescent. You don't want to do the incandescent, the yellow ones, but you can do any normal fluorescent light. I'm not sure. Just the normal ones you can buy at like Home Depot,
Just
the
like,
long
like
ones.
this light is like a white light, doesn't have to be anything special.
I'm not sure about the details, but I know you can just, yeah.
Just saying,
I think don't worry about the full spectrum grow light
like
situation.
the, yeah, those purple ones.
No, yeah, you don't need that.
Okay.
Okay, so containers. The main thing, you can get creative with containers. You don't have to buy fancy, like, official containers. You can use milk jugs or whatever. You just need drainage. Drainage is super important. If in doubt, poke another hole in it, you know? Like, the worst thing you can do for a plant is overwater it and drown it, because those roots need to be able to breathe. They're like lungs. So they need little pockets of air. Which is kind of goes into watering. If you water, it's better to water once really deeply and then let it dry out a little bit and then water again really deeply, rather than watering every day, keeping it moist. And you want to make sure that if it's draining into something else, another container, you're dumping that container out. You're not letting it sit in that water. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then for deciding your containers, it's always best to do individual seeds per cell instead of having like 12 seeds in one big container, because then you're going to have to separate them when you go into the garden. That separation can cause your roots to break or get torn and stressed, and that might make it harder for you to transplant into the garden. So if you do end up planting, maybe for these like older varieties, I planted 4 seeds in one and 3 of them came up. I only need 1, so I'm just going to trim the other 2, the less healthy ones. I'm just going to leave 1, the best healthy one, there. Some of them are fine with tearing apart if you're like, I really want all of them, but just better to plan for only having 1 per container. Okay, and then the soil mix we'll kind of go over when I'm doing the soils, but basically at the beginning of the growth stage, you don't actually need a ton of nutrients in the soil. The seed has the nutrients for the plant at the very beginning, right? So you can have really good rich soil for later, if that's what you want, or you can start with like a normal potting soil you get at the store. Doesn't have to have a lot of nutrients, and then maybe you add nutrients later by using like a fertilizer, like we use natural fertilizer like fish emulsion or kelp, but you can use any fertilizer that you like. Or maybe when you plant in the garden, that's when you add a lot of compost and nice nutrients to the soil. So we'll go over what we do. And you want, when you first start putting it in, you want it to be moist but not soaking. So like, I don't put a seed into dry soil. I mix the soil with the water until you can squeeze it and it forms a clump, but you're not like dripping water out of your hand, you know? It's not soaking wet. Is everyone doing okay? I don't want to be talking too long. Good? Okay. Okay, so now the timeline. So I said 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost, right? So that's now here. There are a few variations depending on the plant. So the first thing that you should be planting is the alliums, the onions, and the leeks. If you're interested in doing alliums, those take a lot longer. So Ideally, you would want to start them in February. That doesn't mean you can't start them. You can still do it now if you still want that. But those take the longest. And then everything that needs to be started inside is basically annual flowers, slow growing vegetables, and heat loving vegetables. So March, you want to do your slow growing vegetables, which are like your brassicas, brassica family. That basically means broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, all of that family, kohlrabi, celery, all of those need to be planted maybe in March or as early as possible. And then you do your heat-loving vegetables in April, so that's now. So you want to do your eggplants, your peppers, and your tomatoes. Maybe your okra, I don't know what people like, melons. And then a lot of seeds don't want to be transplanted. They want to be direct sown. So those kind of seeds, radishes, carrots, beets, basically any root vegetable. Imagine trying to like transplant each carrot, no. Peas, cucumbers, corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, they all like to be direct seeded. You can technically plant them indoors if you really want to. This is not like an all or nothing, but they prefer to not have the roots disturbed and they grow really fast. So if you're just gonna pop them in the soil as soon as the soil is warm enough, maybe in June, they'll grow up and maybe you put your transplant and the one that you direct seeded will be bigger than your transplant that you've worked on for 2 months. So don't do all the extra work if you don't need to. And then there might be some instances where you might want to up-pot your plants indoors before you put them outside, right? So like maybe the tomato that I planted a little too early is really big and it's taking up all the pot, so I'll just take another pot that's maybe an inch or two bigger and take that first one and put it in the other one and fill the soil. So that it doesn't lose all of its nutrients. Once it gets big enough, it needs enough space for its roots and nutrients.
The culinary herbs are those like starting seed starter type?
Herbs you want to do as early as possible too, basically.
Okay.
So now.
Last month.
Yeah, I mean, there's variation because a lot of, like, there's herbs in the mint family and there's herbs in the other family and blah, 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 but I don't want to go into too deep. Basically, as early as possible now, April is a great time for herbs. Some are slower growing, like oregano is slightly slower growing, so maybe you want to do it earlier, whereas basil is faster growing. But anyway, you can always keep it inside and use it as like a little herb taster until you want to put it outside. Okay, so then we're going to talk about actually sowing the seeds. So the depth, a lot of the seed packets will say the depth, but basically the rule of thumb is double the width of the seed. So if you're using a tiny, tiny seed, you don't need to cover it. Don't put too much soil on there because it's not going to see the light. But if you have a squash seed, it's a lot bigger, so you want to do double the width of that seed so you can put it farther down. Same with corn or peas, they're a lot bigger, so you can put them deeper. Whereas like a lettuce seed is really tiny, so don't put it too deep. And then you always want to label your seedlings because otherwise you forget. I would put the date as well as whatever seedling it is, because then you know, oh, I started this 2 months ago. It's time to put it in the ground. And then I mentioned, but I'll say it again, like if you have older seeds, do more per cell. So every year maybe add another seed every year that is older or something, like maybe not exactly like that, but if it's like 4 years old, maybe put 3 or 4 seeds in there. Okay, any questions right now? Okay.
Got one on potting.
Yeah.
It's like if you're gonna up pot, like say you're going for cherry there. Why not just start in a bigger pot?
You can. It takes a lot more space.
Sure.
So like in our scale, like if you have 50 seedlings, that's one tray. You only need one light. You only need one hot area. But once you put it in the biggest pot, then that's like a huge area. Also, their roots don't need it. They're really tiny. It's actually, it feels like a little safe container for them when their roots hit the edge. I don't know. Sometimes plants like like smaller containers better.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that you need to. If you wanted to just start with a big pot, if that's what's going in on your deck or whatever, you can do that.
Okay.
If you're trying to get warmth though, isn't it a little harder in a big pot? to
Yeah, especially if you're
get
using
toward that center?
some kind of heat source. So like if you are using a heat mat or putting it on top of your radiator or something, that's like, yeah, you only need to have this much soil between the roots. And having warm roots is like the #1 way to get healthy roots. You know, if you're pulling your transplants out and your root systems are all really weak, maybe they were too cold and they didn't get any heat underneath.
Is it common to overdo it with heat in that regard? Like if you were to put it on the radiator, do you overcook it?
Yeah, I would like put a board and then put it on. I wouldn't put it like directly on a heat source because you want it to be, like I said, like 80, like maybe 85 degrees. You don't want it to be like 120 degrees. Yeah. I don't know how hot your areas are, but yeah, with some stop, I guess. Okay, so we're actually going into the light and heat area of my talk. Okay, light and heat. So, like I said, they need 12 to 16 hours of light a day. Artificial light helps, or if you have a sunny south-facing window, that can work, as long as your window is not super cold. Because also think about the heat. Maybe you put it on the window and it's fine during the day, but at night, maybe you're getting a lot of cold through that window. So just be careful that you're not putting your seedlings in a zone that's less than 60 degrees. And then, yeah, a heat mat or other heat source on the roots helps germinate and prevent the dampening off, the random death of the seedlings. Random death, it's called dampening off. Random death. And then if you see that your seedlings are really leggy, like they get tall, but they're spindly and they're not like strong, that's probably because you don't have enough light. So maybe you have it in a windowsill and they're reaching for the light and they're not actually getting a lot of it. So you might want to do like an overhead light. And then watering and fertilizing, so you want to keep the soil moist when germinating, like I said, and you want to do gentle watering. You don't want to be like pouring water just on it because your baby seeds are in there, you know. They might come out, you don't want to lose soil, and then you also don't want to overwater, like I said. So soaking that soil once a week is better than every day. And then once they've set their true leaves, so I put on here like a little plant. So you can see this first set of leaves is kind of funky looking. The first set of leaves they set up is called cotyledons. They're just the first leaves that are just trying to grab some photosynthesis for the plant, but they're not going to be the leaves that end up on the plant. Then they're going to set their true leaves, and the cotyledons will fall off and die. Okay? So once they set their true leaves, which is, you know, the tomatoes look like a tomato leaf, the peppers look like a pepper leaf, but they all kind of have similar cotyledons sometimes. Once you set your true leaves, that's when you can start fertilizing if you want to fertilize. So that could be, like I said, we use like a fish emulsion, which is just comes from fish, it's organic, or you can use kelp meal or something, or you can just go to Maxwell's nursery and grab like a little fertilizer, whatever you want to do. Or if you already from the beginning wanted to make a nice rich potting mix, then you probably won't need to do that, like if you added compost to your potting mix. And so then, yeah, you can fertilize like once a week for that few weeks that is in between, oh, they're pretty big and they need to go into the ground. And then, yeah, potting, you want to transplant into the containers that are a little bit bigger, 1 to 2 inches wider. And just be gentle with the stem when you're moving your plants around, because if you break the stem, the plant will die. If you mess with the roots, it'll be okay. You know, grabbing by the roots and transplanting is always better than grabbing by the stem, because they're really small and weak at that point. Okay, any questions about seeding? We're going to go into hardening off soon.
So fertilizing, you said the first week?
No, so only once they've
After
set that
real
true,
leaves.
the true leaves, yeah.
Okay.
So if in doubt, you can just wait, you know, until you're ready to transplant. But if you want them to get really nice and strong and vigorous, after they've set that top leaf, that's when you can start fertilizing.
Oh, is that true with like monocots too, like onions? What do they have one leaf, but they get a second?
No, the alliums don't get cotyledons. That was like a different language, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's not true of everything. But also the alliums don't really need fertilizer.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you have all of these nice, perfect transplants, they're beautiful in your home, you've gotten them to have their leaves, and you're like, oh, we're only 2 weeks out from transplanting outside. You can't just put them outside, because they will freak out. Okay, you need to slowly acclimate them to the temperature, the wind, all of that, otherwise they will die. So it's called hardening off. So we're hardening off our seedlings. So, like I said, 2 weeks before you want to plant. Some people in Finland, there's this whole thing where you're not supposed to plant before Father's Day. So you can think about that. But often our last frost is like June 1st. So there's like some time in between there. But let's say, beginning of June, you think about hardening them off. You want to take them outside for just an hour or two the first time. You're only bringing them out maybe in a warm afternoon. You're not putting them in direct sun, you're just putting them like in a shady area, and you leave them there for like an hour or two the first day. And then every day maybe you can increase the time that they're outside and where they live. So slowly you can put them maybe in a more sunny spot or a more windy spot. And that will make them very strong.
Are you strictly going by time? Like, say it's a month, and it's been 6 weeks, and it's like, they should be, or is it size of the plant?
It's more about time that when you want to transplant them.
I mean, I may want to transplant them right away,
But they're really tiny.
but they're tiny,
I mean,
So, is
yeah.
there a point where you kind of go, you have to give up on the seeds because they didn't?
Oh, like if they
strengthen?
didn't grow at all.
Yeah, if they're stunted or they're not,
I
flourishing, then you just say, I gotta go buy some plants.
No, I think generally plants tend to do better outside.
Okay.
So if you have like sad little plants, as long as you've taken the time to like try and acclimate them outside and then you plant them outside, they might do really well outside.
And how long is the hardening off process? You say add an hour a day, 2 weeks?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to add exactly an hour a day, and you don't have to bring out every day, but you're slowly building up their tolerance to the sun and the wind and the fluctuating temperatures. And then by the end of that 2 weeks, you can just leave them outside all night in their little cells for a couple days before you plant them.
Okay.
If you see any innovative ways to do that, where like bringing some sort of a covered, heated place and just open it up so you don't have to actually move the tray.
Yes, so that's a cold frame. We actually have some outside I can point out when we go. But you can build a cold frame, which basically is like, it has walls and it has like a window on the top that you can slowly open every day, or open and close if you don't want to be moving your seedlings around. Yeah. And then like you can put them in that cold frame earlier and just leave them there with the top closed at the beginning. And then slowly open it every day.
Have you seen that work as effectively as bringing them back and forth?
Yeah. I think you might need to be a little bit careful if you're doing it too early, just because if it frosts, you're still going to kill your plants, or if it's like a harder frost, if it's actually 32,
Oh,
You just want to be more careful if you're doing it too early.
And have you experimented with hotbeds, there's like compost in the cold frame heating up?
Oh yeah, that's nice. Or you can even use leaf mulch,
Yeah.
like filling your cold frame with leaf mulch that creates natural heat.
Do you think it would still die in a 32 frost if they had heat in it?
Probably not. Probably wouldn't die if you had some kind of like natural heat source. It would be fine. Yeah. Or if you're like tucking them into, if they're touching the ground, that's different because the ground actually does have some heat. But if you're just putting them on top of or something cool.
Simple.
Yeah. Okay, so that's hardening off, and the last thing is planting outdoors. So when you do decide, okay, my seedlings are happy, they're ready for being outside, then you want to transplant them in like a cloudy day or a late afternoon. You don't want to transplant them and then have them be in the direct sun immediately after, you know, if they're stressed. You want to try and protect their stems and their roots, root balls and everything when you're planting. You want to make sure that you're covering all of that soil that you had as a seedling with the dirt that you're actually planting into, right? Because if you just have it sticking up, it can dry out really easily. So you're covering that with the dirt, and you're giving it a nice water. Maybe you'll add some fertilizer or fish emulsion or something, whatever you like to do when you transplant, just to give them a little boost. And then if you are worried about it being too cold, you can add some protection, like a cloth, or we use row cover, but you can really use any kind of like gentle fabric over the top if you're like, I'm still scared to do this at night, you know, only at night. Yeah, and just a couple things you can think about when you're transplanting is companion planting. So that means planting plants together that do well together. So, for example, tomatoes and basil do really well together. One of them grows taller, the other one is lower. The basil helps pull the pests from the tomatoes. You know, there's different companion plants that do really well together and can help each other. Onions can be added to beds with your brassicas, with your broccoli, cabbage, whatever, and that helps deter the cabbage worms. Nasturtiums and marigolds are really good for deterring pests. So just think about that when you're planting. Sometimes the more types of plants that you mix together, the healthier each plant will be, even though when we think, oh, I want to just do a row of the same thing, that might not actually end up with the healthiest plants, because all the pests can find every single plant really easily. They just hop from one to the other, you know? And then you can also think about crop rotation. So this is a really important thing for disease. If you ever notice any disease in your gardens, always rotate the family of crops. So if you put your tomatoes in the same bed every year, that dirt might have more pathogens that hurt tomatoes. So it's better to switch the families around. So your heat-loving crops like your tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, those are all in one family. Your alliums, your onions, garlic, leeks, that's all in one family. Your carrots and dill and parsley and that kind of celery and those kind of things are in one family. So yeah, one year maybe you do tomatoes, next year do carrots in that same bed and switch. So yeah, that's like from the beginning to the end. Does anyone have questions? Any questions about anything I just went over before we start doing questions? Yeah?
I just missed one little part because I was making notes. When you're transplanting, I got, when you put them outside, I just missed the part with the soil. I remember the soil. I don't know if you said much about it, but
So yeah, let's say you take this out and you have your original potting soil here, right?
Okay.
And then you have your dirt from your garden. You want to kind of cover the whole base of this soil with the dirt from your garden. Because if this chunk is sticking up and the dirt is here, then this is where the roots are. This can get really dried out really easily.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's good to tuck them in.
So for seeding, say you didn't have access to the standard like seeding soil that is commonly used, that's like a lot of peat or whatever it is. What would you recommend using just like around your property or around here in this area in lieu of that type of seeding?
Yeah, so if you don't want to buy a potting soil, basically the point is you need it to drain. So if you can mix some compost, if you have your own compost bed, and mix it with some sand, maybe mix it with some loam, or any kind of like maybe broken down leaf litter, something light and that can drain. But you don't want it to be like clay, you know? If you are using your garden soil and your garden soil is really dense, you're definitely going to need to mix it with other things, otherwise they can drown easily, the baby seedlings. I don't know, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay. You don't need to fill your garden beds with potting soil, though. That's a lot of money. But just for the seedlings, it's worth it. And then, or if you make your own compost, making sure that that is nice and light. It's not only food scraps, it's also mixed with the brown material, like the leaf litter and the cardboard or whatever you use. Then that'll work too. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
What was it that you mixed with cabbage to pull away the cabbage worms?
Oh, like onions
Just
and
onions.
alliums. Yeah.
Okay.
Nasturtium and marigold might help too.
Okay.
Is that pretty common knowledge regarding companion planting, like with Google know?
Yeah, you can look up companion plants. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's probably a lot of information. Like, I would definitely, there's probably a lot of information that's not true too. So I would use like the University of Minnesota Extension. They have information about companion planting, or like someone you trust, I guess. Like, because there are sometimes like, oh, this flower saves your whatever, but it's actually a draw to pests, so maybe you shouldn't put it next to this thing, and you should put it on the other side of your garden, or something like that, you know?
What about flea beetles? What would you recommend for flea beetles?
Oh, flea beetles, people actually plant a sacrifice crop. So like if you have, yeah, like if the flea beetles are getting your leafy greens that you really want, you can plant something that's really like a nice, strong smelling thing that they like arugula or mustard greens, somewhere near-ish by, not right next to it, but nearby, and the flea beetles will just go there because that's what they like more. Yeah. That's called a trap crop. And you can still eat it, it's just gonna have a lot of holes on it and stuff, so.
So arugula doesn't do well up here because of the flea beetles?
No, you can still do arugula. A lot of it's based on the timing. So like if you do things really early in the season, none of the pests have come yet. So if you do your radishes, your arugula, your lettuces, a lot of those kind of cold spring things, those do better in the spring than they do in the summer because the pests find them in the summer.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so basically we're gonna have to like cluster around this table and maybe we'll do like half the group can fill up some pots and the other half can look at seeds.
Okay.
For people who do want to bring seeds, or bring seedlings home. These are a bunch of seeds that anyone can use. And then we also have more over there that you can take home, if anyone wants to take home any seeds. These are older seeds, which is why they're free. and so just make sure you're putting like 3 or 4 in each tray instead of 1. Yeah.
Are there commonly recommended potting soil brands? Or
well,
is
like,
it, does it have to be organic certified?
I mean, it's based on your preference. I definitely would recommend using organic things for all of your food-related seedlings because you're going to be eating that. So if you are using like a non-organic chemical fertilizer or a non-organic potting soil, it's going to have chemicals in it that you might end up eating, and you don't want that. So we use Fox Farm, which we just ordered, but you can get it at Maxwell's and stuff like that. The bigger large farm stores will use ProMix. It's like the most standard, mostly peat potting soil. There's no nutrients in it. It's just for seed starting. Whereas this Happy Frog this Fox Farm potting soil has nutrients in it too. So then you don't need to add too much like fertilizer or anything.
What about biosolids?
What about
What do you think that these days, because you're reading, that there's adequate labeling with garden mixes you get at the store? Like, do you get a sense that they're adequately labeling when they put biosolids in there?
I mean, that's a whole, I don't know.
It's like city sewer sludge.
Yeah, you can't really trust a lot of, unfortunately, you can't trust a lot of products in this world, you know? Like, our society is messed up, and like, I would just try and find the most hippie organic place you can, you know? Like, that's what we do. Or grow it yourself, that's the best case scenario, but I know people can't do that, you know, all the time. So maybe long-term down the road, you're making your own compost, and then you know exactly what's in there. Anyway, yeah, we can chat about other things as we do this. There's a lot of things to talk about. Okay, so yeah, I put some seeds out here, but there's more here, and maybe if, yeah, like half the group wants to mix some soil together and the other half wants to. Okay, so it helps to have a nice container to mix your soil in, or you can even use a 5-gallon bucket if you're just using like a little bit. This is the Happy Frog potting soil that we use. It tells you what's in there. There's a bunch of stuff in there. I'm looking for the NPK value. Oh, here. Okay, so one thing to look for if you're getting a soil is just these values: the nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, right? NPK. Anyway, this will just tell you if there's nutrients in it or not. So some potting mixes will just be peat. This is the peat. This has no nutrients in it at all, but it's fine for seedlings. It just doesn't have nutrients, so you need to know that you're going to need to fertilize your seedlings if you use peat. It doesn't have nutrients. Whereas this one, it says it has 30% nitrogen. That's really good. Probably wouldn't need to add anything. So we're just going to add some of this. And then if you want to add some peat, this is just what we do, but you don't need to be this complicated. You can just go straight from the bin if you want.
So is peat just wood?
Yeah, it's from peat bogs. It's just broken down organic matter.
So you want to make your own seed? Could you wood chips turn into?
No, it won't turn into peat, but you can compost it with chips, and then that would create good organic matter substitute. Or leaf mulch, like I said. Or people use coconut coir, which is the coconut fiber, which is more sustainable because peat bogs, they have to take them from peat bogs, which is not good.
Kind of sad.
It's really sad.
Well, I mean, if you just go to area, it's really,
Yeah, we can do some more of that.
develop over bogs and stuff like that.
Do some more of that. And then we'll just add water until, like I said, it's moist but not soaking. Okay, this looks great. You can see that it's pumping, but it's not dripping. Yeah, perfect. So you can color one of these, or you can use these.
You want to squeeze it?
No, you don't need to squeeze it. You just put it right here.
Okay, yeah.
And then you just okay. And then you just kind of even it out.
Yeah.
And there you go. And then when you plant your seeds, you can just poke a little hole.
Sure.
Like that, and put them right there.